Welcome to Expedition Networking, a special segment of the Networking RX podcast. I'm Frank Agan, founder and president of AmSpirit Business Connections, and your host for this program. For those of you who are familiar, on the Networking RX podcast, we share information and have conversations with experts, such as authors, researchers, and social scientists. And all of these programs are aimed at helping you learn how to become better at building professional relationships and understanding why they work. In this Expedition Networking segment, however, we're going to bring on successful entrepreneurs and unique professionals and explore their networking adventure and learn how they used relationships to create lasting success. Welcome to Expedition Networking. I've got a special guest on today, Ashley Klein. She's a digital marketing consultant and a freelancing expert. She has more than 15 years of experience in the digital marketing space, and she specializes in building strategic marketing plans, mapping strategy, execution, and collaborating to optimize tactics that drive increased performance for her clients, primarily in the events and entertainment space. But the reason I wanted to get her on, she is a co-founder of an organization called Ice Cream Social, but just how she got to where she's at. This is audio only. She's young. I can see her, you can't see her. But we were talking before we got going. She grew up in a little town west of Toledo, Napoleon, Ohio. And ended up out in LA, probably not knowing many people at all. And she has kind of moved herself along. So Ashley, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Frank, for having me.
No problem. So I guess give us your journey. You shared with me, you grew up in Napoleon, Ohio. What's the mascot, high school, the mascot?
Oh, Wildcat.
All right, there we go. Go Wildcats. But just how you ended up there, and this how, I mean, a lot of people want to move to California, and maybe don't have a plan and then move home because they're not successful or wherever, New York, Florida, whatever. You're doing well for yourself.
Sure. Thank you. So I have some really interesting stories, but I'm going to start at the beginning of how I got to California, because that's going to lead me into a lot of what I've built through networking, which I'm really excited to talk about, especially on this podcast. So in high school, didn't get the best of grades. C's get degrees was my motto. And I did have one class, though, that I excelled in and did really well, and that was marketing. And so right out of high school, my dad hired me and said, okay, help me with my marketing. He had a roofing company that, serviced the area. And I told him, well, first things first, we need to get you a website, because all of his marketing that he was doing was only through the yellow books. So I actually might be older than you think I am.
Okay.
If that dates it, that yellow book advertising was still the primary form of marketing back then. And he introduced me to someone that he had met that does websites. So I chatted with this company, loved them, hired them to build my dad's website. And then I said, bye, Dad, I'm going to start working for this company because I wanted to learn how to code. And I didn't know how to do code or build websites. And they said that they would teach me if I could come into the office once a week, and they would teach me how to code. And in exchange, I would do sales, which I thought I knew a lot about sales, but I really didn't. It took me about 8 months to close my first website deal. So I was working commission only, worked for free for 8 months to close my first job, but I never gave up, stuck around. And a year into that job, the founder decided he wanted to move to California, and, had his Jerry Maguire moment, was like, who's going with me? And I raised my hand, said, I'll go. Was still a teenager, but ready to get out of Napoleon, Ohio, and see what else the world had to offer. So packed my bags with $100 in my pocket and moved on out to California. And that's where we kind of kick off my networking story.
Yeah, I mean, you struggled in sales your home turf, and now you're somewhere a whole nother time zone, whole nother part of the country.
Yes. And as you mentioned before, knew no one except for the two people that I moved to California with, and still doing sales. And so, in order to meet people, to just grow our business, I signed up. I had known about local chambers, Chamber of Commerce, because I had been involved in the one in Napoleon. And then I also learned about a group called BNI, Business Network International. So what I did is I joined all the local chambers within, a close radius of where we were living in Orange County, California. And I joined a BNI chapter. And essentially what I did for the first year, because again, commission only, to feed myself, I set out my schedule every week to seek out all the networking events I could go to, and start with a breakfast event, and then find a lunch event, and then they usually called them like sunset mixers out here. So an evening event where I could get some, hors d'oeuvres for dinner. So that essentially that's how I fed myself.
You literally fed yourself
I
going to it.
literally fed myself by going to those events. So I made sure I hit a breakfast, lunch, and dinner one almost every day. And that was a lot of work, essentially, just going to full-time networking. But that really allowed me to propel my career, just doing that solid for 2 years, and, BNI, and actually at going to these local chambers and BNI, I realized I was also usually very young compared to everyone else who was there. And so it became difficult sometimes to network. I thought, maybe people don't want to talk to me because I'm younger and they don't think I know what I'm talking about. So I found a couple other younger entrepreneurs, and we actually created our own networking group in Orange County called the Elite OC. And it was still running today, but it's essentially Young Professional Society where people could network, and we would do similar events as a Chamber of Commerce. But did that for first couple of years of my career, and that really helped me build a solid foundation for when I stepped out and started my own consulting. Essentially, everything since then, for the past 15 years, all my work that I've done has all been word of mouth, and it's all come from building that solid foundation of just networking 24/7.
So you're no longer with the company that led you out there then?
So long story, but I worked for them for a couple years in California.
Right.
And then I decided that I was going to start doing my own consulting, because going to all these events where I sold websites, eventually Facebook marketing became a thing, and people started asking me questions all the time since I was so young. Finally, my age was working for me then.
Yeah.
And I decided that was a great opportunity for me to be at the forefront of social media marketing, start my own, consulting agency, and run with that. And so
Wow.
did that for a decade, and actually came back working with the company I moved out here with. They had evolved into another company, TicketSocket. And so I do work with that company to this day, of course.
Okay. And Ice Cream Social, is that related to that as well, or?
Yeah, great question. So Ice Cream Social, it's a social referral widget, and it was a feature that was built inside of TicketSocket. So TicketSocket's a white label platform to sell tickets. And so someone would buy a ticket, and then Ice Cream Social would deploy and encourage people to invite their friends.
Okay.
And leveraging that networking, but in a social space. So we'd encourage people to invite their friends to go to an event with them. And if they got enough friends to join, they'd get a reward. And so essentially that became very popular, and we peeled it off and created it to be its own company outside of TicketSocket.
Okay. So what do you focus most of your time on?
Today?
Yeah, is it Ice Cream Social, or is it all part of TicketSocket, or?
Yeah, great question. So the great thing that, all this networking has allowed me to do is really build up a lot of freedom in my life. And that's been an important word for me throughout my entire career. I actually read a book that you might enjoy. It's called The Desire Map by Daniel Lepore. And essentially it's a workbook, and it takes you through this workbook, and you narrow down, 3 to 5 core desired feelings that you always want to be feeling, and how to build your life around that. And one of those was freedom. And different times in my career, freedom meant different things. It might have meant financial freedom, time freedom, and opportunity freedom. And so now I'm able to, I've worked hard to build a business essentially where they all really work cohesively together into one ecosystem. So Ticket Socket works hand in hand with Ice Cream Social and my marketing strategy consulting, working with event companies, and Ice Cream Social being a great tool that we leverage. So I'm able to kind of oversee all 3 of those because they all work together so well.
Okay. I mean, it makes sense. I'm trying to think of a good analogy, but it's kind of like being, or metaphor. It's kind of like being the wedding planner and the photographer and
the
wedding cake. Right. Yeah. I can do any of this. I can only do one, or I can do any of it. So when you transitioned was it difficult when you transitioned from working with the web company to being your own consultant? I mean, you're going to your network and saying, here's a new business card.
Yeah, great question. So yes and no. As I mentioned, social media quickly just came up and became a thing where it was just non-existent before then. So it was very seamless. Everyone just thought, oh, this internet girl, she knows how to do it. So the referrals came in very fluidly, where I was able to feel confident and kind of growing my own business. Of course, you have the struggles as, first time entrepreneur, but I feel that, networking and that sales kind of gave me that grit to power through that. And I have always kept a great relationship with the web company, who's now Ticket Socket. So I'm still happy to hand out my card for that company previously, and any leads that come through, great. I can still sell them, but also able to sell social media services at the same time.
What was your biggest lesson out there networking?
My biggest lesson.
Just, I guess, what was there an aha moment? Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a lesson and a tip, I guess.
Okay, please.
Biggest lesson, as I was going through it, it was exhausting. It can be exhausting just showing up, putting on that face, meeting people, talking people, a lot of small talk, trying to build relationships and make it more than small talk. And then you meet people and then you go get coffee. So there's just always a lot of people time and networking, and that can for sure be difficult in times where I was like, is this even doing anything at all?
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't give up though, because I didn't know how else that I would get business if I quit. And at the time, things like just running Facebook ads and all of that didn't exist. So I would say, looking back, I can see how those first couple years in building that foundation and relationships have really changed the trajectory of any of the businesses I work with. And we can always tie back some of, our biggest wins and successes and new clients and everything back to networking and just, being out there meeting people. And so I say, just like, don't give up, even if it feels really exhausting. Or, I mean, obviously I was doing it almost full time, but even, just push yourself to, network once a week, once a month, whatever you can establish, whether you're introverted or extroverted, do what works for you, but definitely get out there. And in this world where it's always Zoom, it's online networking, I still think the face-to-face, the people-to-people, I mean, that connection just can't replace.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think I tell people that being out there and schmoozing, if you will, networking, if you will, takes a lot of energy.
Yes.
Because your brain is always processing. It's always processing what's going on in the room. It's always processing what's going on in the conversation. I mean, simultaneously, it just chews up a lot of mental energy, which they've shown is truly burning energy,
Yeah.
as opposed to sitting in front of a computer and coding.
Yeah.
It's not the same. It's not the same energy.
It's not.
People don't understand that. Do you
I
consider yourself? Go ahead,
I was going to share a fun tip that I learned early
please.
on. So going to these events sometimes can be daunting and overwhelming, especially just standing there. I think we've all been there, and you're like not really talking to someone, but you want to join a group of people talking and just like insert yourself in the conversation. It can all be very awkward. And so what I used to do is I would stand at the door of all the events. I try to be one of the first ones there, and I would stand at the door. That way, every single person that walks in, they almost think I work for the chamber or something, and they all immediately come to me and introduce themselves. And so I'm able to introduce myself to almost every person that walks in the door. And then, once everyone arrives and you're, walking around doing whatever, you'll find that people are always going to come back and kind of seek you out because you're the first person they met when they feel uncomfortable, but they're like, oh, there's a familiar face of when I just got here, and can talk to someone. So if you're new to going to those kind of events, I would say stand at the door and just introduce yourself to everyone like you work there.
That's a great tip. That's a great tip. Question I was going to ask, are you naturally introverted, extroverted, somewhere in between?
I would say it just depends on the season in life.
Okay.
There's times where I have been very extroverted, and there's times where I feel more introverted.
Okay.
So, yeah, during those times it is, like I said, more of an exercise to just get out there and network and meet people, but just reminding myself of the value and what it's created.
Yeah. Well, let's shift gears here a little bit. You've kind of told us a little bit about Ticket Socket and Ice Cream Social. You want to kind of elaborate a little more and types of clients you're looking for, how the audience can help you?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So you gave a very nice bio introduction of me earlier, but I would say in most simplest terms, I do digital marketing. And primarily I do digital marketing for events. I do a lot of, fun runs, lantern festivals, circuses, music festivals, you name it. And I do that with Ticket Socket. And Ticket Socket's a white labeled ticketing platform where you can essentially sell your own tickets to your event. And through Ticket Socket, as we mentioned, was birthed Ice Cream Social, which complements very nicely just working in the industry and networking and marketing. It's a social referral tool that is not exclusive to events. We have a lot of clients where we really peeled it off and created it to be its own company was during COVID, when many people were not going to events, and we had some time on our hands at Ticket Socket. So essentially we used that time to shift a little bit, and we had some clients ask us, hey, can I use Ice Cream Social on my main website? Because I can't sell event tickets right now, but we're going to try to sell more t-shirts, merchandise. And so we said, sure. And we essentially built it to be its own standalone product. And you can use it on any website to just grow your referral base of customers.
Aside from clients, working with clients, people who are doing events, who do you like to network with? I mean, who are good lead-ins for these clients?
Sure. I would say for myself and throughout my career, one of the things that I learned very early on was about channel partners, referral partners. And what I found works really well for me personally is aligning myself with agencies. as an individual consultant who wanted to stay an individual consultant. I did not want to go work somewhere, was to align myself with agencies, because agencies were eager to bring people on when they're busy, but not necessarily always wanting to hire. And they had great clients that had great budgets. So that also allowed me to not spend as much time doing sales and focus on what I wanted to be doing, which was the marketing. So by aligning myself with the right people, was marketing agencies essentially. And, for Ticket Socket, Ice Cream Social, our largest partners are merchant processors, really, Square, Stripe, companies like that have clients, and we build relationships with them to, really focus on our referral marketing.
Okay. Best way to get a hold of you. Somebody's listening. How do they get a hold of you?
Yeah, you can go to Ashley N for Nicole Klein.com.
AshleyNKlein.com.
Yeah, someone already took AshleyKlein.com ever since I was really young. I just couldn't snag it.
That woman. Oh, she's
No.
probably nothing but trouble.
She's just squatting on it.
Yeah, I know. I hear you. I run into the same thing. Well, Ashley, I really appreciate your time here today. This has been, I love your journey. Keep going.
Thank you, Frank. Yeah, appreciate it, and love talking to. I don't know if you consider yourself an Ohioan since you live there, or you still got those Michigander ties?
I'm a Michigan boy. Yeah, I'll always be a Michigan boy. Yep. So.
Cool. Well, it was great connecting with you.
Thanks for joining us on the Networking RX podcast. Please put what you've learned into action today and let us know if you have questions, comments, or ideas for future topics. You can email them to us at podcast@amspirit.com. That's AmSpirit.com. Finally, so you never miss an episode, be sure to subscribe to the Networking RX podcast through iTunes, Overcast, or however you receive your podcasts. Now get out and network with someone.
The Networking RX podcast is the copyright production of AmSpirit Business Connection. All rights reserved.